Hey everyone, you're listening to the Active Turnkey Podcast, a podcast designed for hands-off, passive real estate rental investors. In the Active Turnkey Podcast, you'll hear Tom Olson and Jared Stoltmeister discuss all things turnkey rentals with other turnkey providers, service providers, and rental investors. Our goal is to help you reach your financial freedom and whatever comes after that. Let's go. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Active Turnkey Podcast. I'm your host, Jared Stoltmeister, and I have with me the Tom
We call
Olson.
it the Active Turnkey Podcast, Jared, because it's active.
Yes, it is.
It's because we're active.
Yeah. Where are you going?
I don't know.
Okay. There are these moments where, you feel like you're on the same page with your partner, and at that point, we were clearly off script, and I didn't know where you said it.
We're not partners, just so you guys know.
In business,
Yeah.
we work together.
No.
Whole nother
different
conversation.
topic.
Yeah.
Different topic.
Yeah, but we're back.
We are back.
Number
for
51.
The 51st podcast of this. I'm Jared, I'm pretty sure that we've reached 1 million listeners.
Well, you said a couple million last podcast. You did.
Dang it, Jared.
Yeah. Apparently we
You
lost
always
some.
catch me.
We lost
about 2 million listeners
it must
from
have
the last
been,
podcast.
I think the last time you mentioned some political things.
That's probably why.
Was.
So whatever you do, don't go back and listen to the last podcast because there was too much politics.
It was only a sentence, and it was not really that political. But I could see how some of you guys could come that way. It could come across that way to you. And,
yes, I mean we could talk about it now.
But this is about the next million.
Okay, next million.
The next million. We're gonna
after this podcast there will be 5 million listeners. I'm sure of it.
Sure. Yeah, we'll gain it back. So for those of you who are listening through that whole spiel we just did, I'm sorry, but we're back, and here we are. So here is a topic today that everyone's concerned about, and it really ties into last week's podcast.
Well, everybody's asking this too. Like, so last week we talked about what did we talk about last week, Jared?
Well, last week was more or less talking about
is this
still
a good
time to buy?
To buy, yeah. But so a lot of people that are saying, okay, yes, I do want to buy, right? Then, well, how?
That is the next question.
Because a lot of people I talk to are having a hard time finding real estate.
Yeah, and so the title of today's topic is Acquiring Rental Properties in 2021. And you're absolutely right. Even our list. So some of you guys who are on our list, that is the question. I've had 4 or 5 guys today reach out to me, texting me, emailing me, hey, do you have any deals?
That's the problem. The people want the deals and we don't have enough of deals for them.
Right. For those of you on our list, that's definitely a problem. Absolutely. But that's not
so
just
maybe
you.
we should stop doing podcasts and we'll get more deals. I think that's what they're thinking.
Maybe.
I think they're thinking, well, if you'd stop doing the stupid podcast and go get me some more deals, and I could buy some more deals from you.
So irresponsible. We really are.
We really need to figure this out.
Now, mind you, we have a team of people right now that are scouring, looking for deals as we speak.
Scouring.
So, yes, they're scraping different channels, but that's what we're talking about. How do you acquire a deal today in this kind of market? And naturally, for a company like us that builds rental portfolios for investors.
Jared, I just keep misbehaving today. I'm sorry. Like when you said scraping, every time somebody says scraping, like I have my VA scrape the MLS, or I have a VA.
Is that the word they use?
I hear it all the time. Like I scrape. The only thing I can think of when I hear that word scrape is somebody scraping their nails on a chalkboard.
Sure.
I don't know why. And I'm sorry for interrupting this podcast, but I can't get out of my head.
Is that the word they use? Is it scrape? Or is it?
I've heard it used as scrape.
Scrape.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm thinking.
But we do.
Word.
Like we do.
Yeah.
Like Jared's right. We do scrape the MLS and scour. We look at every auction website. We have mailers that go out and we try to get people that way. We talk to every wholesaler that we possibly can. And there are times where it's hard to find real estate. It's hard to find rentals.
Yeah. Just case in point, a couple years ago, we were going to the Porter County Sheriff's Sale. So Lake County's the northwesternmost county. If you pull up the map, it's up against Illinois and up against Lake Michigan. And Porter County's the next county over. And it's a great place to invest. I think the average price point is probably a little bit higher than Lake County.
A little bit.
But when we used to go there, we go to the Porter County Sheriff's Sale at the county site, at the sheriff's sale, sheriff's office. We go in there. We're just in the lobby with like 7 people. And one sale, we walked away with 5 houses. One sale. And then a year later, we were in this massive room with
like
over 100
people.
plus people. Yeah.
And there was only like 30 properties left.
Right. And everyone's going crazy bidding. And that's just a case in point of what places like that come. And so people are trying to do the same thing. They're trying to find opportunities. And so Tom, what are some strategies, some ways that people can find deals in 2021?
So I guess it depends on the listener and what you have time to do. I mean, obviously this is a turnkey rental podcast, but you can, I want everybody to know you can go and do all the things that we just talked about.
Absolutely.
Like you can scrape the MLS. You can mail out postcards. I mean, I know investors who mail $6,000 worth of postcards every single month because they're looking for a deal and they think that they can get a deal that way. You can do PPC ads.
Yeah.
Which we do. You can do Facebook ads. You can post on all the Facebook groups and spam everybody, which I don't think really works that well anymore. I think that some people have gotten deals that way, but it is a little bit spammy. There's lots of different ways to be able to find a deal, but that's not really what I think I'm going to talk about today. Like you could do all those things. Like so those are your options. You've got mailers, you've got ads, digital, you've got ads offline. I mean, I know people that do, the We Buy Ugly Houses posters. There's even bandit signs still work. Sure. All those things are things that you can do. You can find online auctions. You can buy in tax sales. You can buy at sheriff sales. All those things are happening. But this year, right now, it seems like there's not that many properties, even in those avenues. Yeah. It's getting really, really hard to find properties, which I believe kind of goes back to our last podcast of like, is this a good time to buy? Well, if there's nothing available at some point, like it's just gonna get harder and harder. It's not gonna get easier. What are some ways, or what are some acquisition strategies, that you can think of, Jared, maybe right now to kind of like maybe give our listeners maybe some tips, like what have we done that you think would be helpful to be able to acquire this year, which maybe you didn't use this strategy before?
Well, one thing you can think about is, what does your portfolio look like today? So in many cases, when we were initially started selling turnkey properties, right away we were selling the C+ or better model. Period. That was it. That was a C+ or better. And it's fine. That's a great way to go. And then we opened up Gary. And so if you're that C+ or better guy and you have held to it, that's great. If you're still comfortable with that, great. However, that could be an avenue for you. If you're willing to change, not necessarily your standards of a product, but the area grade. You could open up some more possibilities to if anything, diversify.
Point. So like, and with that, what I would look at first is what are the areas that I think are the most likely to become maybe C+ areas or B areas in the future. Like,
absolutely.
So there's definitely areas around, especially big city metropolitans that 3 years ago were really bad areas, and now they're like, what in the world happened to this area? I mean, I've seen it all over the country. Everywhere I travel, I swear, I feel like I was down this exact street, and it looked nothing like this 5 years ago.
It's absolutely true, Gary. Gary's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something I would think of. I would also think of different markets. Like finding different markets that maybe they haven't had this appreciation yet. Maybe they haven't had a pop, and maybe you're buying at retail today, and you can find a house that's like a retail, but you're happy with that price, and that price still cash flows. There's still areas of the country where that's, something. Now you're going to have to do some more work on your own to find boots on the ground, or find property management and find handymen and do that kind of stuff. Yep. You're definitely going to have a little bit more work on this on your end. But like, that's another idea of something that I would, think about. And I'm just trying to give you some out of the box ideas. So something else that's worked for us this year, and it's really strange because there's even people now that are teaching this full time. I know people that used to teach people how to wholesale are now teaching seller finance, like how to acquire with seller finance. Yeah. So there might be people's properties in which like they want more for their property than what you really want to pay. But if you could get a really good interest rate and long-term, financing from the seller, it would be something where there's no money out of your pocket, or there's very little money out of your pocket. And it would be a way to think, oh my goodness, like this is a way that I can actually do this. Something that's completely out of the box and not normal for our podcast here is the master lease acquisition strategy as well. So like instead of going and actually acquiring the asset, I have met, it's funny, this year I've met 5 people that's what they do. That's all they do. They go out and they find other people and they master lease. They get a lease from this other person, and they're just doing regular rentals. They're not even doing Airbnb or vacation rentals or corporate rentals. That's a whole nother thing that you could do as well. You could do Airbnb or corporate rentals. And I know most people that are listening to this aren't probably interested in doing that virtually, and maybe you are, I don't know, but it's something that you could do. You could go out and find other properties that are for rent that maybe would be willing, that maybe they're under market rent and they're renting them for less than what you know that you can get. And you're willing to pay that every month and know that, hey, like if I can get $300 more a month for this, then it's no money out of my pocket really, other than like providing the lease. And then as long as you are upfront with everybody and give everybody the proper paperwork and there's proper contracts in place to be able to release that property out to somebody else. So that's another avenue as well. But something that I think for us has been really like a big deal over the last 2 years, and something that I've kind of noticed in the market, especially during COVID, right, is buying occupied rented properties.
Yep. Yeah. It's been wide open in some cases. Now, it has obvious risks.
Oh, it absolutely has
risks. The risks are huge.
But like what we have found is that most of the time these are under market rent.
Almost every time.
So they're not just under market by like $50 or $100. They're under market by a lot.
A couple hundred minimum. And it's very low.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's a property, for instance, I bought this year. It's rented for $725. I was on the street when I looked at the house, and there was a for rent sign. So I was like, oh, I'm going to call this for rent sign. And the property, guess how much this property was rented for, or was being marketed to rent for, Jared? $725. It was a 4-bedroom, 1-bath house.
It was $725. You said
they were renting it for. Wow. It was being rented, and I've since acquired this property. There was a property very similar to this property on the same street in the same block that was being marketed for rent for $14.95.
That's a little increase, folks.
So, like, the way I look at it is like, no wonder this guy wants to sell the property. He's not getting near enough money for this property. And I think there's a lot more tired landlords right now than we think there are. So, like, it's always an acquisition strategy to go find tired landlords.
Sure.
But right now, like, it's even more so. It's been exacerbated. It's been multiplied, magnified because of people not paying rent during COVID, or because of just the regular COVID restrictions, or just whatever. Like, there's lots of people out there that are just tired and they're sick of owning the property, and they're more than willing to maybe sell or finance to you, and they're also maybe more than willing to sell you a property that's and I think you can get even a deal still on some of these properties. And maybe at some point, like, you might have to kick out a tenant at some point. And maybe at some point, and when I say kick out, I don't mean like just completely evict. I just mean when their lease comes due, it might be an opportunity to say, okay, we're just not going to renew. We're going to go in and make this property nice. And then we're going to be able to get market rent. I mean, think about that particular instance. If you put $40,000 into that same property, and now you're able to get, $1,500 a month for rent, like, what's the return on that? Like, that's way better hits, the numbers that, what you're thinking about when it comes to return on investment. So, I mean, I'm not sure that this is like a super long podcast. Like, again, like, we're not going to get into the weeds and like tell you how to actually go and, fill out your postcards. Like, that's just not who we are and what we do. You can do it. There's lots of people that teach those things, but there's lots of different ways to acquire. And the best thing I would tell you to do, though, is go network with other people that are doing it. And sometimes you'll just get deals from those people, from that network. But like, ask those other people, how are you acquiring deals right now? And we've been able to acquire way more houses by doing that this year than anything else.
Yeah, and so you talked about guys who are tired. Not all of them are tired. Some of them just see like in our area, there's just enough appreciation. They feel like instead of improving the home. Let me just try to see what I can get by selling it as is. I'll sell it as is with a tenant in place, and sometimes we've been able to acquire it through that way. Now, naturally, there are risks that we know about, and they're calculated for us. We know, and so right away, some of the things we're asking, Tom, right? We're asking for lease information.
Oh, sure.
I mean, we want to. In fact, we had a situation recently where we bought 2 different purchases, where toward the end of the sales process, one seller actually post-dated the leases for like the day after we closed, the first date. So they signed leases for like September 1st, and we closed on the 28th of August. And it was from September 1st through the end of September. So they and because we thought it was still a good enough deal, technically they changed the terms of the agreement, obviously. But, we could have backed out because they changed it, but it was still a good enough deal for us to have.
Yeah, that's definitely the due diligence part.
Absolutely.
Of that. So maybe we could actually have a whole podcast about like the due diligence specifically of buying rented properties. That's a great topic, actually, if you think about it. But like, yeah, there are definitely some risks.
Yes.
And honestly, if you're buying a hot property that's already rented, that's not like turnkey. So, for instance, there's going to be risk of what needs to happen in the future, what repairs need to know. So, kind of like do your own due diligence. I actually believe that you can still get properties way below market value in that way. Like, there's not very many ways you can still get a deal. But like, for instance, you might be able to buy a property for say $110,000, $120,000. It's worth $140,000 that maybe still needs $10,000 worth of work. That might be something that might be, right up your alley. You may be able to buy a property for $90,000 maybe that needs $40,000, $50,000 worth of work that was really worth maybe $160,000, $170,000 that will rent for $1,400. Like those are still great deals, and they work for people when they're trying to build their rental portfolio.
Now, we will caution you. Tom brought up some really good points, especially we talked about the seller financing option. If you're looking and you're trying to explode, so you're trying to go crazy in 2021. It's not about you getting a few deals. I mean, you're trying to just go from like 0 to 100 in 2 years. You know what I mean? You're going crazy. That's where you can get yourself in a little bit of trouble. It's about the deal. It's about the total number as opposed to the value of each deal. You know how well you're doing. It's because we have had experience in our network. We've seen guys who went the seller finance option, and because they were not managed well, the property was not in great condition, and there was poor tenants, then you start really stacking up the problems that you may have long term. So if you're going to go these routes, this is how you acquire multiple deals that you wouldn't normally do because you're having an inventory issue. These are also things you might want to look at, and again, it kind of goes into how to acquire, how to vet the deal, but you also just want to be careful with your aggressiveness when you're trying to acquire these deals. And so do you have anything else, Tom, to add as far as other channels?
No, I just think that
acquire?
Right now we have really done really well this year, and I just want to throw that tip out there about buying acquired rented properties. They may need work, and that's okay. Like, as long as you're willing to have that patience, as long as you have that understanding up front. It's not turnkey. It's not what we try to sell. But at some point there may be even opportunities for us to sell some of those properties, and it may be an opportunity for people to be able to pick up deals that maybe they wouldn't be able to pick up any other way. But I know that that's a question that I keep getting asked of, like, how can I acquire right now? Like, there's just nothing available out there.
Well, we did have, actually, Tom, that did happen last week. So I had an investor who had some funds available come up in an IRA, and he had cash, and so, I mean, at the time I don't have a turnkey. So those of you guys who knows, we have turnkeys that right now are in rehab, but I didn't have a turnkey ready for him. But he actually asked for, is there anything you have? And so we did have a deal just like this.
Well, there you go.
That
I
was
didn't even
available.
know.
Yeah, it was just like that. It's rented. That and in the end, every single property we acquire has the purpose and the intent to rehab later and sell down the road. In this case, it was just there. It was just cash flowing. The guy's paying, I think, $800 a month. And they were paying every month, and so he gobbled that deal up. So
if you go back to like our first couple podcasts, we talked about active turnkey. What does it mean to be active turnkey? It is basically that that method, if you think about it, it is buy, rehab,
Yep.
rent, refinance, repeat. And like it is kind of, it's coming back in a different way now. Now it just might be, it's a rented property. It has an issue that you got at some point, maybe it's under market, maybe. Right. And if you could be patient with it, it's just something that I think if you can be patient and you're willing to think about the long, if you're really in it for the long term, like I think a lot of people think they're in it for the long term, and they're not really in for it for the long term, and they look at it after a year and they're like, oh, this isn't quite working, and I'm like, well, you haven't been in this for anywhere near the amount of time that you need to be to know what it actually is going to give you over the last over 10, 20, 30 years. So I feel like it's been really good for us. Like this has even been something that we acquired. Like, I think we've actually acquired more houses in this way this year than any other way.
Even me personally, I'm looking to scale my own personal portfolio, and right now I currently have 3 properties that I acquired recently. 2 of them are vacant, and 1 was a multi-unit. So my strategy, I am looking for 1 more deal right now, and my strategy is I'd like to buy an occupied one because I have 2 already in rehab. I prefer not to have a third sitting waiting for my contractor to get to it. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to look for an occupied property, and of course I'm going to vet it to make sure they're paying rent, and then I'll wait down the road and then move them out down the road. So it's just a strategy you can use if you're looking to do the BRRRR method. Exactly what you're saying. It's almost as if it's the best way to buy rentals.
It's almost like that too. It's like the best way to buy rentals.
So we hope this podcast... It's
kind of like the tagline of our podcast.
It worked out. The segue was flawless. So we hope this podcast has brought you value. Don't forget, we do build rental portfolios for investors. And so if you're looking to start that process, you can reach us at buyolsongroup.com. You can get on our buyers list. You can see deals that we've sent out recently, or you can reach out to me directly at jared@buyolsongroup.com, and we can help you get on that list.
Yes. And don't forget, subscribe, click the like button, tell your friends about us personally. Come out and visit us. Text me and Jared anytime. We love talking to investors and trying to figure out how we can better serve you. And that's about it for today's episode.
That's right. Yeah. Active Turnkey.
The best way to buy rentals.
Thanks, guys.
Olson Group Network makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Unless specifically stated otherwise, Olson Group Network does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. Any third-party materials or content of any third-party site referenced in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions, standards, or policies of Olson Group Network. Olson Group Network assumes no responsibility or liability for the accuracy or completeness of the content contained in third-party materials or on third-party sites referenced in this podcast, or the compliance with the applicable laws of such materials and/or links referenced herein.